Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, are the Habs really a bottom five team, or can they get out of the cellar in the Atlantic and the NHL? Laura and I debate and more inside today's show.
For Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 673 of Locked On Canadiens. As always, thank you for making us your first listen. If you are listening to us wherever you get your podcast, and thank you, as always, for those of you who have subscribed to our YouTube channel. We have very, very exciting news, and we cannot wait to share the actual date of what we are going to be doing. You're going to watch me suffer. Laura's going to make fun of me. Carly is going to make fun of me. We might have some special guests, and we will be doing some kind of AMA with a twist. We will let you know more once we have a hard and fast date. However, I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matlin. I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, just full admission here, we're completely ripping this episode off from our friends over at Locked On Sharks. Thank you, JD, because it is the off season. The Canadiens have not signed Kirby Dach, not extended Cole Caulfield, not named Nick Suzuki captain, and not fought the Red Skull on top of the Statue of Liberty next to Captain America. So we are going to discuss whether or not the Montreal Canadiens are or are not a bottom five team in the NHL. But before we get into that, how are we feeling right now in the doldrums of summer and nothing is really happening? How do we feel about the Habs now that we've had time to sit a little bit?
You know, it's been really interesting because if you've been listening to the podcast over the course of the summer, we've been inviting some guests on. Some are old friends, some are new friends, and we're going to continue doing that through the offseason. There's a lot of people in the Habs community we want to meet, we want to hear from, scouting and people. And it's really interesting because we also have a lot of commenters on the YouTube. Hi, shout out everybody. And the opinions are many and varied. A lot of people are talking about Connor Bedard. And some people are talking about how there's no way the Canadiens will be that bad next season. So we thought, particularly because JD at Locked On Sharks suggested this as a topic because both Scott and I are having extremely terrible weeks. And I also have to thank Scott for taking this episode. As you noticed, it's an odd numbered episode, but Scott is taking the lead on it. We wanted to talk about this because people just can't agree on this. There's no general consensus. And I think that's totally fair. For me, I think that the Canadiens are still going to be a bad team. And people get upset when I say that. And then people get mad at those people that get mad at me. But I just don't think they're going to be a lottery team because I think for me, the key lies in who else is competing for those lottery spots, right? So the Canadiens themselves, first of all, there's no way they're going to be as abysmal as they were last year. There's a lot of reasons that we think that they should be better. There's just, for me, a lot of other teams that are worse or are slated to be worse. Like, I'm not expecting a whole lot from the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm not expecting a whole lot from the Arizona Coyotes. Buffalo is basically treading water, it seems like. You're looking at the Seattle Kraken, who are also trying to get a lottery pick again. Scott brought up Winnipeg, which was a really interesting one that I hadn't even thought about being bad. The Philadelphia Flyers are just careening off a cliff. So I think the context matters because I don't think the Canadiens are going to be a lottery team just based on the fact that there are at least 5 teams worse than they are. But I also think that there's a couple of things at play, right? We're doing will they be a better team? First of all, a full season of Martin St. Louis. Second, they've got a new defensive coach. So hopefully that is an injection of new ideas, new structure. We've talked a lot about the defensive woes of this team, and I don't think we need to rehash them. Third, there's a lot of players that had rough seasons that turned it around under Martin St. Louis, and there's no reason for us to think that won't continue, right? It's not like Cole Caulfield massively overperformed over the course of the season. Yes, he was shooting at a really high rate towards the end, but that that's going to average out. So he's going to have a better year overall on average, right? Nick Suzuki also started out, he was one of the people that wasn't bad all year, but he also, really found it under Martin St. Louis, and we expect him to kick it into another year once his contract is like, now that his contract is kicking in. There's young guys that want to prove themselves, that want to stay on this team. Just think about every time they call up somebody from Laval, whether it's Raphael Harvey-Pinard, who might even be a full-time NHLer at this point. Anytime, like these young players know that there's a huge opportunity to be part of the core going forward, to be on this team, to be part of that, whenever they expect to contend. Now is a time to prove themselves to the front office and the coaches before they start getting traded away for assets, right? That's really, really important.
I'm glad you mentioned too, like I Philadelphia is one of those teams that, because I'm looking at the NHL standings right now and I'm like, okay, who got better, who got worse in the offseason? And yeah, I don't have the rosters in front of me. And we're going to talk a little bit about predictions and why we think the opposite. I think they can't possibly have as bad a season as last year, where every cataclysmic thing went wrong. Bad offseason, Carey Price was injured. Joel Edmondson was not ready to start the season. Everyone struggled because it turns out Dominique Ducharme was not a good coach. Front office dysfunction related to that coach. Cole Caulfield, everyone's struggling. I don't think it can possibly be that bad. Do I think they're going to be a good team? No. I am not saying that. I don't expect this team to be a playoff or even a fringe team next year. I think they will be much better than 55 points. And I think that bottom half of the Atlantic Division will be a lot more competitive. Well, even more so, because it literally went 75, 74, 73 points for 5th, 6th, and 7th in that division. A whole year of Martin St. Louis, a full offseason, a full preseason, a very clear message about what this team wants to do helps put focus in that locker room. And you may have the return of Carey Price, assuming he is 100% ready to go. If he is, that's a huge morale boost, something you cannot put a value or a point total or a model statistic to. It just is a thing. I don't know how else to describe it. And you just have guys that do want to prove themselves. You have a whole team of guys who might be like Michael Pezzetta last year that go, I got to make this work, or I'm going somewhere else, or, it's over with. You have pieces that are probably going to be traded. Evgeny Dodonovs, a potential Mike Hoffman, Yoel Armia, etc. You have guys who are going to be hungry. The team can't possibly be as bad as last year. I think a new coach is going to help. And I think Martin St. Louis, we're going to see, bumps in the road, but we're going to see what he's made of in this. I think by the fact that they hit rock bottom, they can only go up. And like you said, Chicago's going to be a mess. Philadelphia is going to be a disaster. Some team in the Metro, and it could be New Jersey, it's going to be Philadelphia, obviously, could fall off a cliff again too. At some point, other teams are going to stop being that good. I still think Winnipeg, obviously Arizona is going to be bad. They don't have an NHL team. They don't have an NHL arena. It's a joke. Winnipeg is on the cusp of just falling off a cliff. I think Montreal is going to be in that bottom 10 very easily. I do not think they're going to be in the lottery, at least not right now. But that's if everything goes to plan. Coming up in our next segment, what happens if everything just goes off the rails again? Laura and I are going to discuss what that means coming up next. But first, you're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up. You lose your license. You lose your job. You total your car. You kill someone? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are often tragic and are often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. And that's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. We are back, and folks, I got to be real honest here. As much as we think the Canadiens are going to be improved this upcoming season, because quite frankly, the bar is embedded 6 feet into the ground next to Jimmy Hoffa somewhere, they could still somehow trip over this because they're not going to be great. They're not going to be good. And my biggest fear with this team right now, and there's two big question marks. What happens when Martin St. Louis hits a sophomore coaching slump? Because all coaches go through them. Can he work his way out of it? Whereas Dominique Ducharme just kind of threw up his hands and went, well, what if we send Cole Caulfield to the AHL? And that was his solution. And what happens if the goaltending isn't sorted out? We don't know what's going on with Carey Price. Yes, Jake Allen is here. Yes, they signed Samuel Montembeault. There's Caden Primo still. There's a lot of question marks in that group there. And Laura, I'm not crazy. We have faith in Martin St. Louis as a coach. I know he's still very unproven by coaching standards, but I can't help but feel that little trepidation going, well, what happens if it's a dead cat bounce or a new coach bounce, whatever you want to call it, and the Habs still struggle next year?
I think we have to prepare ourselves for that possibility, mostly because you're looking at this team. They haven't even figured out who's going to be on the roster yet. There's a bunch of people who haven't even been signed. Who's going to be the starting goaltender? Can you answer that question for me right now? No, you can't. Right?
It's you, the listener, and the friends we made along the way at this point. That's what it is.
And that's who the real starting goaltender is, right? That's one. Two, the whole right side of the defense is a question mark. There's tons of young players with potential in this system at every position. We're not saying superstars. We're saying there's tons of young players with potential in the system, including potential superstars, guys who, if they hit their ceiling, are going to be magnificent. There's a lot of question marks, right? All of those things need to be tested out. Every single one of those players is going to need to be given a chance, whether you're talking about their 9-game limit or you're talking about they're staying in the AHL and we're just not going to see them. Or you're talking about a guy who breaks out and never gets sent back down, right? We don't know what it's going to look like. So the coaching staff also doesn't know what that looks like based on their experience in hockey, based on what they know, based on what the development people and the analytics people tell them. They could probably make educated guesses as to how to make this team, how to get the most out of this team, how to get the most out of this roster. But they're still lacking in so many things. They're either lacking it completely or whatever's there is not ready. Scott, you're making a face.
I wish I hadn't looked at the depth chart at Eyes on the Prize right now, because I'm like, I know right defenseman is like light, but I'm looking at this.
There's nobody there.
There's nobody in the AHL that is signed to an NHL contract. Like Madison Bowie is likely to be the top right-handed defenseman in Laval this year. And there's to list the right side for everyone right now. I know we talked about this with Sebastian High a couple of weeks ago, but it's David Savard, Chris Weidman, Justin Barron, and then Madison Bowie. There's no one else in the AHL right now that is signed to an NHL deal. And then in the prospects, it's Mayu, Kostenko, Sobolev, Miguel Torini, and Arvid Henriksen, whose rights, I believe, expire soon. There is nothing to really inspire confidence in that side. And like Laura said, it's a huge question mark. And then in net, it's Carey Price, Jake Allen, Samuel Montembeault, Caden Primo. In the AHL is Joe Verbatic, Kevin Poulin, and Philippe DeRosier. There's what happens if we have last year all over again? And injuries happen. I'm not saying they're going to get through this year injury-free. If that happens, buy a lotto ticket. That's amazing. It feels like there's so many overhanging questions. For offensive-wise, there's so much that there are guys who should be in the NHL potentially this year who are likely going to be in the AHL this year. Guys like Jesse Alonen and Raphael Harvey-Pinard are going to start in the AHL this year because there's likely not roster space for them. The right wing depth right now is Cole Caulfield, Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, Evgeny Dodonov, Yoel Armia, Alex Belzile, and Jesse Alonen. Their forward group's phenomenal on the right side. Down the middle, it's a little hit or miss, but there's bodies there. And then the left side is where the issue is. And we're going to see a lot of guys, I think, swapping positions. There's got to be a lot of trust there. And if Martin St. Louis can't get it figured out and this team is stagnating, we might see some of that, I want to say self-doubt that crept in last year. You saw guys that just looked defeated, shell-shocked. We don't want to see that again. Yeah, losses are going to happen, but you want positive building along the way, or you become the Buffalo Sabres or the
Right.
Edmonton Oilers or the
You
Leafs of
tread
the late.
water.
Exactly. You don't want to stay in the muck for too long because then you end up like that horse in the never-ending story.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's horrifying for everyone to watch.
And that's the thing is that, like, I have faith in this coaching staff, particularly Martin St. Louis, that a slump will happen no matter what. Like, it's hockey, it's going to happen whether it's players, it's a team. I have faith in him to bring fresh ideas. And that's something that I haven't felt in a long time with old school hockey coaching and old school hockey general managing. I think this is going to be something that's going to be really important because I feel like too often we either overemphasize the psychological aspect or we underemphasize it. And so for me, I would like for them to have like a balanced approach to it. That's what I want. And so the thing is, you're saying, like, what if they have another season like last year? Well, then they get another lottery pick out of it.
Yeah, like that. My thought is that they're gonna fall somewhere in that like 7, 8, 9 range. I can't imagine things being that bad again. I don't think Martin St. Louis will allow things to get that bad again. Everyone goes, oh, well, his record wasn't that great after he took over. Yeah, he had a good start, but then they fell apart. It's like, yeah, because they traded everybody and half the team was injured. Like they were missing starting defensemen, they were missing starting wingers, they're missing starting goalies. Like it was Samuel Montembeault and Caden Primo for how many weeks? Like it's not a guaranteed
A struggling Caden Primo.
Yes, and the AHL playoffs reassured a lot of people along the way there. I don't want them to finish in there are worse things to happen to this team, and getting another high pick and then hopefully Florida bombing out would be great. It feels like there's so many more ways that the season could go wrong than it could go right, but also last year kind of left an imprint on, I think, a lot of Habs fans' mind and ours that no matter what you do, they had games where they played well and still lost like 5-2 because that's just the way the season went. And I think it's going to take some time to kind of shake off that, little bit of PTSD about that season. I am hoping it is not as bad as last year. There are worse things, but I can't shake that feeling that when something goes wrong, that everyone's going to panic immediately. And we have one segment left talking about this. We're going to give our Atlantic Division predictions, just some other various stuff, and that's all coming up in our next segment. But first, today's show is also brought to you by the folks at betonline.net, who are the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Get all your favorite sports and events in the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. There's MLB baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. Anything your heart desires, you can bet on at betonline.net. They've got live in-game betting, scores, podcasts, all the news that you need to keep you covered day to day. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening right now. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Laura. So I had to look up the NHL standings mostly because I forgot who plays in the divisions because I'm terrible and
Well,
have forgot.
Arizona's been in the Central Division now since Seattle started, right? And today I was looking for them in the Pacific Division power rankings. Just spoiler alert, we did power ranking voting at Locked On with all the hosts, and I was like, "Where's Arizona?" I wanted to rank them last. I ended up ranking Vegas last.
So my thought.
Deserve it.
Well, yes, because they're going to be terrible. They don't have a starting goalie, and half their team is falling apart, and they can't put half of them on there until they put half the team on LTIR. Besides the point, I am looking at the Atlantic right now, and it's likely more competitive than it ever has been, but it still has such a depth between top teams and bottom teams. Because last year, the 4 teams that made the playoff out of the Atlantic were Florida, who won the President's Trophy, Toronto, who had 115 points, Tampa, who had 110, and Boston, who had 107. The Bruins have got markedly better. Patrice Bergeron is back in the fold for at least another year. David Krejci is back. But I believe their starting defense, not Dougie Hamilton, Charlie McAvoy, and Brad Marchand are not set to start the season. I don't know if David Pastrnak was banged up too. I think I saw that. I'm not 100% sure.
I want to say they're all out for some length of time at the beginning of the season, is my understanding. And some of them for long. I think Brad Marchand was going to be out the longest.
And my point with this is I'm not saying Boston is going to miss the playoffs, but they're going to be chasing that 4th spot, I think. They're going to come on strong and late once all these guys are back. if I'm starting at the top, and I can't believe I'm saying this, and I hate to say this division is Toronto's to lose. But there are a lot of question marks. They didn't do a lot to fix their goaltending. They let Jack Campbell go, and they went out and got Ilya Samsonov, and they went out and got Matt Murray. Neither of whom has been a proven starter in the NHL in a little bit of time. Matt Murray has been bad, to be quite frank with it, and Toronto hasn't done a lot to address their depth needs on offense. But Florida, I think, is going to take a step back. They hired Paul Maurice as their head coach, hired Sylvain Lefebvre as one of his assistants, and are coming off a season where they had all the things go right for them and then traded Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar and got Matthew Tkachuk. Florida, I think, is going to take a step back, and then lurking in there is Tampa. And who knows what Tampa will be on a given year. I don't think we're going to see we're not going to see 3 50-win teams in this division, but I do think it's those same 4 teams that will make the playoff again. I think it'll go Toronto, Tampa, Florida, Boston next season. And Laura, I'm curious who you think will be how you would order your top half of the Atlantic next year.
Okay. Nobody yell at me. It's going to be Toronto, Tampa. Okay. I think that's a given. Florida, for me, is a huge wild card. They could be that third spot, or they could be like the bottom 2, right? I think Detroit and Ottawa made a lot of moves to take steps forward, but I still think that they're going to be mediocre. I don't think they're going to be bad. I think they're just going to be like, right? So we're still looking at a Toronto, Tampa, Florida top 3. I think that Ottawa really did change the dynamic of their team in the offseason. I think they made some moves that would make their fans happy. But as a Montreal Canadiens fan, I will obviously hope that those moves crash and bang and fall apart. And, Ottawa ends up like not in the basement, because I don't want them to get a lottery pick, but I want them to like not just miss the playoffs, but like convincingly miss the playoffs. That's what I want. But they, I think that they're a pretty good bet for 4th in the division. And then it's going to be Detroit. And then who am I forgetting? And then Buffalo. No, Buffalo is going to be 7. Montreal is going to be 8. So who am I missing? I forgot someone.
Boston. Florida, Toronto, Boston.
Yeah. So I think Ottawa is going to come ahead of Boston, but none of them are going to make the playoffs, because I think Boston is still good, like we said, but they're going to have a lot of their good players missing out on a lot of time, and they're still pretty thin. Boston being a good team, it's not a deep thing. It's not a deep team. That is why I think that they're not going to be that good.
Yeah, and I kind of look at the wild card here is that, 3 teams from the Atlantic will make it, so we assume across the board for us, that's going to be Toronto, Tampa, and potentially Florida. Boston got that first wild card spot. That might be another Metro team or something like that. When I look at the
Metro team, the Metro division, that's as our friend Jay from Locked On Blue Jackets puts it, is the Thunderdome division.
The Islanders might be getting a lot better. Like Nazem Kadri apparently is signed, but they're not announcing it because Lou Lamoriello is this crusty old geezer who wants to do things his way, and it's infuriating. Like Columbus went out and did things like sign Eric Goodbranson, but then got Johnny Gaudreau. Like, who the hell knows? All we know about that division is that New Jersey and Philadelphia are going to be terrible. Which, what are you going to do? The bottom half of the Atlantic for me is I think Montreal's going to be potentially last in the division again, but I think they're going to be much more competitive. I think also Buffalo is a wild card in terms of, are they going to take that next step? They still don't really have a proven goaltender. They're waiting on Devin Levi and Eric Portillo, who went back to college this year to turn pro and then really go for it. Detroit has all these young guys. Detroit feels like they're going to be back to being a playoff team soon. And your point about Boston is a very good one, because what happens if they fall right down that without all these guys here? So the bottom half of the division, I think Montreal could rival Ottawa. I think Ottawa has good players and could be a very good team. They still don't have goaltending and they still don't have a very good defense. Not saying that Montreal does, but we've seen teams that try to outscore their problems. Eventually it doesn't happen. So I think it's going to go Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, Montreal. but that bottom 5 there, I think, could be shuffled depending on any kind of hot streak. I don't think any of them are going to sniff the playoffs, but I think we're going to see that entire division. It's going to be a bloodbath across the board. Like, Montreal doesn't like Ottawa. Ottawa doesn't like Montreal. Detroit doesn't like Tampa and Boston and Toronto. Like, every game is going to be competitive. They might not be equal talent levels, but I think the Habs can compete in there. I don't think they're going to come close to winning the division. I think next year, not this upcoming season, but the season after that, is when they should start pushing to try and make the playoffs. You got to do it at that point if you've got your pieces in place. But I don't think the Habs are going to be walked over this year. I really don't. I don't think Martin St. Louis is going to let that happen. Laura, do you have any opinions or thoughts you want to get out before we say goodbye to our listeners and viewers?
Send us mailbag questions.
Yes, we will be doing the mailbag for Friday, so we were recording that Thursday evening. So please, 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 please send us your mailbag questions. We will let you all know about our very special AMA once I have all the pieces in place for what we need. As always, follow us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens. Follow Laura at The Active Stick. Follow myself at Scott Matla. Subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we will see you all next time.